Hey guys, blessed be everyone, and welcome to episode 20. Episode 20. We've done 20 episodes so far. It seems like the time just flies on by like a witch on her broom, right? So we have the wonderful and very, very talented Paul Friedrich, right?
Paul
Frederick,
Fredric.
Frederick,
Yep. Yep.
Frederick, Fred, Frederick. He has so graciously let us interview him. And like I said, I'm so excited. So, Paul, tell us about yourself and how you got on your path, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, I'm Paul Fredric. I do a few different things. Probably the closest thing in orbit of all of this is I do a podcast called Daemonosophy, where I explore various subjects relating to the dark side, to black magic, left hand path, spiritualism, and all points in between. I've also written a couple of books on different subjects. My most recent book that I'm that I'm pushing right now is called Second Awakening. Here's a copy of it right here. It's an experiential exegesis of the secret of the golden flower, which is like a deep dive into Chinese Nidan inner alchemy, and and different things associated with that. I've been a follower of spirituality and the arcane and the questions of existence since I was very young. I was raised by, I was initially born into a fairly secular family with some religious elements in it, religious, extended family and stuff, and so religion was always there. So I got exposure to Christianity and stuff at an early age, and my father had always um, trained me, encouraged me to have an inquisitive mind. He taught me to play chess when I was very young and read when I was, read before most of my friends were reading, and so I had questions in mind, and I always had questions about, um, what is God, what is the meaning of life, uh, why do bad things happen to good people, and what happens when we die, and all of these sorts of things. And um, pretty early in life, I got the sense that, um, when I would speak with religious family members or pastors in the churches we would visit, um, I would ask these questions like that. I wasn't of a mind of, oh, I wasn't ingrained in the culture where you just know you don't ask certain things. So I would come out and ask these questions, and um, I got a sense early on that a lot of people in these positions themselves, they really don't know the answer to these things. So when I was in my teen years then, and I graduated from high school in 1986, just to put it in a historical sort of context. Um, I started getting interested in the occult because I was still just because all the priests and authorities around me couldn't give me answers didn't mean that maybe there's not really something else out there. So I got really interested in these things and started exploring them. Of course, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time. It's a typical 80s kind of story, and so I would find books from the library on, you know, uh, witchcraft. Like Alexander's was the thing. Alexander's and Sybil Leek were probably the main, witchcraft type things that I was exposed to then, and then a little bit of Aleister Crowley, a little bit of goetic magic, and things like that. Um, so so I followed along with those things for a while, and then eventually I discovered the Satanic Bible, and that was around 1983, and that was a real game changer for me because it presented something that I wasn't finding in the other stuff, right? The thing about so much of this occult material that I read is that it was talking about, well, if you do these things and do these things and things will happen, and here's some spells you can try and stuff like that. But it didn't really satisfy any of those questions about why or wherefore or what reality is or what the world is made of. And when I read the Satanic Bible, I'm like, this was the first thing I found along those lines that really framed all this stuff within an ethos and within a metaphysics. And it was a mostly material metaphysics. And so I was, at the time I encountered this, I was at the point in my life where I had not yet read Aristotle and Plato and things like that, and found out that, well, there's people who talk about metaphysics in a very intelligent way, also, way before 1966, right? So even these are not entirely new ideas. So my studies expanded from there on out. As I went through life, I really resonated with Setianism and the ideas in there. I really resonated with Gurdjieff, the Gurdjieff teachings, and as far as like a practice goes, that's something I've probably done more consistently than anything else.
You had mentioned, well, you said first of all the dark side, and then I expected like a Sith to come out with his little red saber, lightsaber. Um, do you? Well, okay. So I have two questions. One, do you still read the Satanic Bible, and do you still own one? So I guess that's two questions. I'm sorry.
I own a few.
Hmm. Okay.
I own a few of them. It's been a while since I've gone back and cracked it open to read it, but I read it so many times at one point in my life. I think I have most of the high points of it memorized. And there's like, since he wrote that book, there's been so much about like what the resources that he pulled together into it from Ayn Rand and Ragnar Redbeard. I recently had on my podcast Shane Bugbee, who actually published he found the manuscript of Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right, which is contains the sections that Anton lifted to put into the Satanic Bible. He's kind of the guy that he broke the Might is Right, story about the Satanic Bible. So, so yeah, I mean, it's still it's something I will always have a fondness for it in my heart. Um, and that's something that will probably never change. But at the same time, it's something that speaks to um, a certain feeling and a certain attitude that is more associated with being a 13 to 16-year-old boy. I mean, it's got that kind of energy with it, and there's a lot more beyond that. I feel with the world and what the human equation is. Another thing I've come to realize is that a lot of the rebelliousness, rebellious aspect of Satanism and left hand path stuff is really more properly understood as a rebellion against church Christianity. So let me say what I mean by church Christianity. There's a teaching behind all that, there's a teaching. There's a Christianity before Christ. So there's a teaching that goes way back before that, which we see um, uh, flickers of in Persian Zoroastrianism, and in the ancient Chinese. That's another thing I get into in this book is I correspond a lot of these teachings correspond with teachings in ancient Egypt and ancient China and ancient Persia. Really, and it's really those areas. It really is those areas, and then and then spread from there into India and different things like that. But I think there's a real there's a consistency to that there, and some of that shows up. A lot of this teaching, and I'd call it an esoteric teaching because it's and when I say it's esoteric, I mean it's not. It's a teaching that's meant for an a small group of people. It's not a teaching that's meant for all of the world to follow. That would be an exoteric teaching. And esoteric teaching is different because it requires an active participation in it, and it requires more than just learning some history and some rules, right? It requires an actual a voluntary opening of the self in certain ways to be able to have access to different sort of levels of materiality and things like that. Um, so I mean, if you go read like the Gospels right now, you can find like these traces of like esotericism in it, but they're the parts of the Bible that people never focus on, and for the most part, what that book has been used for and translated into is what I call church Christianity, which is a system of learning a certain history, that's specific to certain cultures in the Mediterranean at the time, and certain rules to abide by. And for the most part, church Christianity it's all literal, right? It's all like intended like literally, like no, that stuff happened with the ark and all of that. Whereas like it's like when you're talking about an esoteric teaching, to be able to even comprehend something like that, it's necessary to be able to understand things not literally, to like what we'd call metaphorically. Even in the New Testament, there's like when Jesus gives or what is it, the parable of the sower, I think, or something like that. They say, well, he began to speak in similitudes, right? So he's not talking about literally something that's happening. He's giving like a lesson about something. So all of that being said, most of what I currently, quite a lot of that satanic material really is best understood as a rebellion. It's not even a rebellion against the esoteric material. They didn't know about it the same way the Christians don't know about it. They just know this church Christianity teaching. We follow these rules. This is what we do. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm not disrespecting that at all. People follow what follow what moral systems that work for them, and what historical systems that they relate to. Um, but the rebellion against that is rebelling against a facade. It's equally a rebellion against a facade, and so this is kind of where Setianism kind of like grew out of all of that, is this realization that there's actually like, well, you know what, beneath all this, there's actually some more substantial material within all of this, and so that's where I go. So all of that is to say that when we say left hand path and black magic and all of that, it's really just a convention, and really it's just words so we can like get to a better understanding of it and have a conversation about it. The reality though is that magic is just the energy within you, and you tap into it or you don't. You're present for it, or else you sleep through it and you miss it. So
Excellent put. Because I had someone say, we were going to interview her, and she said, "You know what? I'm not really into black magic." And I was like, "Well, every good witch knows that. I mean, or whatever satanic person, every person knows that magic is neither black nor white. It is neutral. But people who don't understand the magic will call it, oh, that's evil. That's black magic, or if you're trying to help someone, oh, that's white magic. So you're trying to help someone. I mean, so well put. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for saying that. I'm sorry, I'm moving my camera. um, I actually do have a satanic Bible as well. And I also have a witch's Bible. So, do you have any other Bibles? I have two more questions. I'm so sorry. I keep coming up with more questions. So, why the Satanic Bible? And do you have any other Bibles? So like what captured you about the Satanic Bible? I know you mentioned that it was kind of there for you when you needed it, but what captured you the most? Or I mean, otherwise than going into, oh, just believing the Christianity, okay, yes, we have to be good, blah blah blah.
Well, one thing. So I'm kind of journeying back in time into my 14 year old self here. I had found that a lot of the magical and occult stuff that I was reading at the time, they would always, because you always come into it, you always come into that magic and occult stuff when you're a kid, wondering about, if you had Christianity in your background, you're wondering about the devil. What about the devil, right? And then all of this magic and witchcraft stuff, it feels like they're kind of, it always felt like they're kind of talking around it, or like not want to go there, and not really talk about what that was. So when I saw the Satanic Bible, and just the way, what, it's do you have a are you old enough to remember B Dalton's bookstores and malls?
Yes.
Okay, so there was a B Dalton's bookstore in the mall, and this was in Lincoln, Nebraska. Not a small town, but not a large town. And I would go there with my D&D buddies, and we're looking for D&D books, or new, if there's any new occult books, right? Which there never was, right? There's like Israel Regardie's Golden Dawn, and a couple of other things, and there's never anything new. And then one day we showed up, and there was something new there, and it was that Satanic Bible. And the way it just sat there on that rack, it was just what it looks like, or what it looked like then. I don't have a copy of it sitting here, but it was just incredibly dark red, deep red, with that solid Baphomet on it, and it just says the Satanic Bible. And it's been so repeated in our culture now that we've become very desensitized to it, I think. But at the time, there was no one saying anything like that. At the time, no one had the balls to come out and do it in my world. And again, this is the 80s. Of course, all of this stuff had already happened. In fact, it was I didn't even know, but it was actually all already over by the time I even saw that there. But the way that stood out, it just immediately had this air of, I'm not trying to fit in with this crowd over here, right? I'm not trying to, go along with whatever is popular, with whatever's going to sell. It's like, this is what it is. I'm just coming out and saying it, you know? And that's the excitement, of the guy who has the courage to just come out and say, this is what it is. It's Satanism. And this is what Satan, and so then you go, wow, that's fucking rad. But what does that mean? Because Satanism is like that. Does that mean I'm like, against God, or whatever? And so then you get into, like, LaVey's thing about, well, maybe God doesn't exist, but maybe it does. Maybe Satan exists. Maybe it doesn't exist. All of that kind of aspect of Satanism, which really is just, that really just represents his struggle with exoteric philosophy. The fact that he was never really had contact with any esoteric ideas, you know. He just had contact with exoteric philosophy. So the Christianity is in conflict with atheism, and so that conflict is kind of played out in here. But the significant thing is he just kind of puts all that aside and says, you know what, it doesn't that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is your existence right here in this world, which is a world of struggle, and it's a world where you need to take responsibility. It's a world where people are trying to take advantage of you. Don't be taken advantage of you. It's a world where people are trying to bully you. Don't let them bully again. Fight back, and here's how you do it. Here's how here's the ethical system, and which a lot of actually comes from Ayn Rand. But then he presents this magical system, which again presented something that I had not seen before in any of the other occult stuff. The other occult stuff says, oh, here's a witch's ladder, or here's this, go do this spell, and it will maybe, and it will work. Why is it going to work? Well, there's, X factor or something like that. Um, the Satanic Bible explained really clearly it's not the bell or the sword or anything that makes magic work. What makes magic work is the energy within you, right? It's the energy that you have that's large, that's connected with emotions. It's connected with your feelings and emotions more so than it is with the mind, because like the three rituals that he puts in there are all connected with fear, love, and lust. Okay, fear, love, and lust, or anger. Fear, love, and anger. That's what I wanted to say. Fear, love, and anger, and then he takes love to the uh, and compassion. That's it. Compassion is like one of the things in there. You see, it's so long ago since I've read it. I'm actually kind of struggling to remember what his rituals were, but they're all like emotionally like based, and so that's very significant. That's where you realize that magic is not about learning some special words or some special combination. It's about finding a new capacity of energy within you, and then doing something creative and productive with it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like, well, I'll just say this. You said you graduated from high school in 86. That's the
Mm-hmm.
year I was born.
Right.
I was born in 86. So,
Good year.
it was a great year. Um, but see, I never turned away from sorry, not atheists. I never turned away from Satanists because, if you think about it, really, Satan is just another god. Even if, the Christians will say, "Oh, he's the king of lies," or whatever. But wait, hang on a second. Time out. Go backwards. In your Old Testament, does it not say that God deletes people like left and right, and he does like this whole wiping out of people in Noah's Ark? If I remember correctly, Satan only deleted 7 people. So
Yeah.
who really is the bad one here? Oh, they don't like to talk about that. Like I
Right.
have a guy every day in the chat room that I go on. His name is Kit Cabello, and he goes by Hardlands Media. There's a guy in there that literally, I swear, he sees Satan in his soup because everything is Satan, 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 Satan. Everything. This is Satan, that is Satan, bad. I'm like, man, you must be seeing Satan in your soup. What? What is up with that?
Yeah, I mean
Um,
that's a problem. In part, I think that's a problem with um, that mankind has lost the ability to not take everything literally. And this is also the reason why everyone gets so fucking mad and triggered like all the time, about everything nowadays. No one can take anything not literally anymore. And Gurdjieff talks about this in in his book, Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, um, about how this is something that mankind as a whole lost at a certain point, and it's connected with the hypnotic sleep that man exists in currently. A part of that hypnotic sleep is this belief that everything that is said is like literally real and true, and so people start seeing like, seeing Satan everywhere. But I mean, there's deeper things in it. So for instance, there's also the story in in the Gospels about Jesus meets a man who's possessed by demons. And he says, "What is your name?" And he says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And so then Jesus does his thing, and everything, like, the demons, like, all leave him. And then he has a singularity of personality. So what that could mean is that they're referring to, in the state of sleep that we exist in, we exist in a state of multiple personalities. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yes.
you got the personality for, your son, the personality for your spouse, your personality when you go to work, your personality when you go to the grocery store, you got your personality when you come to, when you're doing your podcast or whatever. And it's like, I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like we wear
eventually,
masks. We are
right,
excuse me, they call it wearing different hats.
right,
So we put on a different hat for when we're at home and we're among, the people we love. Whereas if when I go to work, I'm someone else. I'm somebody completely different who tears computers apart for a living.
right,
Um, but when I'm, on my podcast, obviously I have to. On this one, I am full on Wiccan, and I take my religion seriously, and I know that there's Christians out there that take theirs seriously. But I just I can't help but let them know that technically Jesus was a male witch because he did miracles, which are a form of magic. And then, of course, the conversation goes to, well, you're Satan. Okay, great. Thank you.
right. No, it just ends. Yeah, no, you can't. It's unfortunate you can't have a conversation because, I mean, a lot of times I do want to have conversations with people like that because, just to see what they think about this or that. But immediately goes to a trigger, right? There's immediately
Right.
a trigger, and it goes into a judgment, and you can't continue with it. But I mean, I think that that's like that multiple personality thing is is so important. And this is probably one of the things that really kind of led me away from that, from, like, say, like, the Satanic Bible's teachings, because ultimately that system teaches, or ultimately LaVey teaches, oh yeah, no, it's great, have fun, change your masks all the time, have a good time with it. And there's something to that. And that's in the New Testament too, when he says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. It's like, well, if I'm at the
Mhm.
grocery store, I need to act like a grocery store. I need my grocery store face on. It's not
Mhm.
going to help me to bring my Satanist face, my Satanist mask. You know what I'm saying, to the
Not unless
to
you
the
want to get
grocery
kicked
store,
out.
right? But when you start to realize all of these selves are not real, then you start to ask the question, well, what is the real? Do I actually have a real self? And then that's a deep dive right there. Then that's
Mhm.
a question that's like a lifelong pursuit. I think that's a question that I'm trying to address with the book Second Awakening. That once you realize that all of that stuff is just like transient and fake, then you know, then what can you hope for other than the possibility that there is something inside you that is real, and to seek after that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for asking or answering all my questions. That's really and I'm glad that we get to have this conversation because you know, for some reason when they hear like Wiccan or pagan as Matt is, um they automatically were Satanists and, we worship Satan. I'm like, I don't worship Satan. That's your religion. Satan is in no way in my religion whatsoever. That is a Christian, Muslim, Jewish thing. That's not us. Um, but I thank you, Matt, if you want to go ahead and ask your questions. But thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just literally got done reading Second Awakening as I was emailing you the other day, um, and New Brew Generator, actually another book that you wrote, which I
Yeah.
wish I had when I was a teenager because um, the
I
most
wish I'd had a book like this when I was a teenager.
no kidding. I mean, and there's another thing with wearing a mask. Everyone's got to go have their Starbucks and their food and everything, but if you would just realize how much money gets wasted doing silly things like that, trying to be cool. Yeah, that book would have helped me a lot growing up. So I appreciate that as well. But to get into Second Awakening, how important is meditation to you? Let's go to there.
I think it's super important. I think it's super important. So, I was, going way back, I've tried meditation like a couple of times when I was younger. And then when I was about 30 is when I had first encountered a Gurdjieff group, which practice meditation. Not all Gurdjieff groups are necessarily into meditation in that particular way, but I mean at that time I got into the practice of doing it like weekly when I'd meet with a group, and I was told back then, you really need to do this every day to get the most out of it on your own. At least a half hour a day first thing in the morning. And I said, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. But I never did it. I tried for a little while and then it'd trail off. I tried for a little while and it'd trail off. And, like, I don't know, about 10, 15 years later, I found myself in life where I'd become very unhealthy. I'd become very kind of workaholicish. I was traveling a lot for my job, and eating restaurant food and stuff, and getting really sick. I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and so I had to start taking medication for that. Um, and around 2021, well, no, not 2020. I get confused about the dates now. 2019 or so. I reconnected with some of those people from my past, and I started doing meditation again. During this time, again, it's like I'd do it every once in a while. Like if I was really stressed out. But then 2019, I started doing it. I got to a point where I started doing it regularly. I finally got to a point where I started doing it regularly. Um, every day, half hour a day. And I did that for a couple of years. And after a couple of years, um, I experienced a kind of fundamental change occurred. Um, and I talk about this a little bit in the book. This experience that I had, and it was just the best I can describe is just a sort of ecstatic awakening of a new capacity, inner capacity within me, that just kind of charged through my whole being. And immediately after that, it's like I was just immediately after that, I just made all these changes in my life that I knew I'd had to make, but I just hadn't been able to make before. So I was drinking. Oh yeah, there's also the booze. I forgot to mention the liquor. I was drinking like really heavily, and I had been drinking really heavily for many years. Um, Even before, between the Satanism period and the and started a meditating period, there's also a time period where I was in a touring band, and you pick up a lot of bad habits with that kind of stuff. As much fun as it is, there's a price. There's consequences. So anyhow, um, yeah, after I had this experience in 2021, it's like then it's just like, it's just I just didn't have I didn't have the appetite for it. I think that's probably the best way of describing it right now, is that there's a fundamental change in appetite, and that's the appetites all around, food, liquor, excitation, and any other sort of sexual appetite, all these things, like just like sort of just all at once, just kind of like, just kind of like cooled out, um, and and I was really I was really kind of freaked out. It was so significant. I was kind of freaked out about it. And I've experimented going back to the occult conversation and magic conversation. I was no stranger to altered states of consciousness. I'm no stranger to ceremonial magic and um, the sorts of experiences that you can have with that, and you can have some experiences with that. You can unlock some new aspects of yourself. But what I had experienced, um, I experienced it in my meditation. So I just so yes, I consider it. This was a part of the meditation. It has to do with that. I just immediately reached that it just that was just really really clear. Um, I was like freaked out by it, and I didn't talk to anyone about it for a couple of years. I didn't speak about it with anyone. I spoke a little bit with some of the people that I knew who were more experienced in meditation, who were, I guess I could say, were part of the esoteric circle um, that I was connected with. Um, and kind of the response there is like, yeah, well, great, yeah. So just keep up the keep doing what you're doing. Um, and then I remembered that I had read that book, Secret of the Golden Flower, when I was younger. When I was in my 20s, I'd read that book. Um, and for those not familiar, Secret of the Golden Flower is a ancient Taoist book written by it's accredited to Lu Dongbin. Most people, when you say Taoism, they think Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching. If they know a little bit more, then they know of Chuang Tzu and the and his book. I think it's just called Chuang Tzu is his writings. But Lu Dongbin is yet another figure from that tradition. He's more mythological though. He's like considered like one of the eight immortals. So this book goes back to ancient sources and oral traditions and stuff, and it was rediscovered by um, Richard Wilhelm, who was a missionary in the 1800s or late 1800s, early 1900s, somewhere around there in China. Um, he's the one who also gave us the I Ching, translated the I Ching. But he also translated this book and he sent it to his friend Carl Jung, the psychologist. And then Wilhelm died. And then Carl Jung added, changed the word yin and yang to his words animus anima, and added his own material to it and then published it. So I read this book when I was in my 20s, and I thought, oh, it's a cool book. I like it. But I certainly never started meditating. It's just the fact that the book is telling you that you have to meditate, for a while. They say 100 days in the book, which to me just means you just do it until you stop worrying about how long you've been doing it, a year or whatever. Um, this book like explains all these. It tells you all these things that are going to happen, and it also, um, it says that after you go through this process of meditate of 100 days of doing the what it calls the backward flowing method, which is basically um, how your attention is focused as a part of meditation. So, and if that's done, that's done for a long amount of time, it unlocks this other capacity. And they talk about the primordial spirit comes to dwell within, which is like kind of like I feel connects with the idea that we have the daimon, or what the Zoroastrians talked about as the Favashi, our higher self, our higher intelligence, is kind of like crystallized in some way, um, and then it starts talking about the creation of another body, or a second body, or what we sometimes call a astral body, and it refers to the there's a line in there where it mentions the scarab beetle rolling the dung ball, as a symbol of the creation of the astral body, which I just thought was so interesting. That just connects it up with ancient Egypt. There's just so much going on in here. So anyhow, I went back and I started rereading that book. After I'd had this experience, and my God, I'm seeing all of this stuff in it that I hadn't seen before, and it's just connecting up with all of these other things, and so I decided to write a book myself.
How long did that take you to write, do you think?
So I did this book like pretty quick. I think it was about 3-4 months.
That is
About
quick. Wow.
about 3 or 4 months, yeah. Whereas like Nebu Generator took a long time. Um, Nebu Generator went over a period of years. Um, one of the challenges with Nebu Generator is that since it talks about economics, it immediately ties you in with current political ideologies. Um, it's just unavoidable.
And
It's
plus, money is
unavoidable.
kind of always changing.
Right, right. I think this is part of the reason, part of the problem with people like actually learning economics. It's like basic economics should be taught in school. I mean, so much hours of bullshit that I learned in school, whereas like if they could have just taught me about economics, how the Federal Reserve actually works, um, on bullshit, right? But just some basic knowledge like that would be like so helpful, but they don't, because it's all ingrained, it's all tied up with politics. So my writing of it was that resulted in it taking a long time, a much longer time to write that book, because things are like changing all the time, and you're like, oh, what do people think about this? But when I did Second Awakening, it was like it just all came out, and I just don't care what anyone thinks about it. um,
But it was a long time, the experience going into the making of the book, I'm sure. A
it's a
lifetime.
long time coming. You can probably tell I struggle even now to like put all of it. I mean, there's so much that gets tied into it that I struggle to try and put it all into a succinct and coherent kind of manner. So the book is really three parts. It's the first part is sort of is a summary of my my experience that I've just kind of talked about here. And then the second part is tips and tricks on developing a meditation practice. Just some of the basics. It's not the end all be all, but just some basics of it. Um, and then the last part of it is the exegesis. In other words, so I took out all the verses from Secret of the Golden Flower and then just gave my inspired commentary on it. Because so much of my experiences as I was going through it are like tied in with it, so it gave me so much more opportunity to elaborate on what I had been experiencing.
Yeah, I love it because I think anyone that's ready, it really encourages you to meditate while you're reading it. Every time I read it, I sat down and read a little bit, and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to meditate now because this is obviously working. So, yeah, it gets you going.
Yeah, so that's really significant that you say that, because what I've found is that it's kind of like going to the gym, or something like that. It's like when you first do it, I mean, there's just incredible inertia that you're working against, and all these new muscles in your body are like rebelling against it, and they're saying, "Ow, that hurts. This sucks. Let's find something else to do." And but what happens is if you push on through, then eventually you get to a point where it's not as hard anymore. And meditation is like that too, and that's why there's certain postures that are associated with it, because there's certain small muscles that get activated as a result of that. And this is Gurdjieff talks about this. Gurdjieff talks about the small muscles like need to be activated in as a part of the work, and these small muscles are like have to do with the diaphragm and breath and different things that are going on in here that really the head brain doesn't know how to manage any of that stuff. There's no way you can go in and like manage all this stuff that's going on inside of you. Um, you can imagine, you can use your imagination a lot to to imagine that you're doing all these things inside, but ultimately the work that I'm talking about in Second Awakening is not imagination, and this is why we emphasize finding a sensation, right? The work of finding the the um, the the triad of sensation, um, breath, and attention. Sensation, breath, and attention. And these three things like work together in a watching of the breath and a realization of this movement that's a circular movement that's up in the back and down in the front, that kind of movement. So if when you do stick to it for a while, eventually you find out that not only does it become easier, but sort of um, a new sort of pleasure center opens up to where it actually becomes like really really gratifying, I guess. There's like a gratifying aspect to the struggle of total and complete stillness.
And yet, you were talking about eating red meat still being a part of your life, whereas usually people will talk about being vegan or whatever. No offense to anyone, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so having had ulcerative colitis for years, I was on this journey of like, anyhow, of like, I was trying to change my diet. I went close to vegan for a while, and really things just got worse. And then I went more paleo, um, and that like seemed to like help things. And then at a certain point, I got on so many drugs. I was on Humira and I can't remember the others now. A couple of other like commonly prescribed like colitis drugs that I was on that I was like, oh well, I told myself I was close enough, and then I just didn't worry too much about my diet anymore. And really things like got worse, and the drugs were keeping the colitis from like falling through, piercing through. Um, it was managed, um, and when I had this experience, it was just like I just started changing. I didn't even think about I'm gonna like eat this or eat that or not eat that. I just started my appetite change for things, and I just started following that. And and I started like getting like much better. Like my health just started to improve. I started to lose weight. People started to notice. And then um, I was at a I was at a family reunion, and I met a cousin of mine who lost a lot of weight on the ketogenic diet, and we were talking about food, and she said, "It sounds what you're talking about sounds like keto." And actually, some other people had told me that too. I guess I'd heard that from a few people. They'd tell me, "Oh, it sounds like you're on a ketogenic diet." So I went and I looked up keto, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's pretty close to what I'm. That's pretty close." Yeah. So so then after from there, I eventually made the jump to like just dropping out like nuts, and I would still have like occasionally do some broccoli or vegetables or rice or something, and I just dropped those things out of my diet and just went completely to animal products, meat, beef, bacon, butter, eggs, and water, and alcohol was like out of the picture now, and it's like that just got me back where I was normal, and I stopped taking the drugs, and it's like this whole period of like complete disharmony and dishealth is like gone. It's like a thing of the past. And I mean, it was bad. My lowest level when I had colitis before I got all the drugs, there was a time when I could not get up off of the couch. All I did is go to the bathroom all day, and I just laid on the couch all day. And I was like in between. I was kind of in between projects with my work, and I'm really lucky that I was, because if I'd had to get up and go to a job, it would have been like horrible. And there's something more. There's something more to it than that. Um, and I think a lot of the veganism is veganism is I think a lot of it is politically motivated, um, and or economically motivated. You find other reasons for it. The further you go back with societies, the hunter-gatherer societies, they always want meat. They always like seek out meat, and they go for vegetables or anything else only when there's nothing else available. And this has always been a big mystery, even in anthropology, in conventional academic anthropology. It's a big mystery why hunter-gatherers moved to agricultural society. Some people say, oh, well, this has to do, the myth, Garden of Eden, the fall from Eden is a representation of that. But even like anthropologists are like, it doesn't make sense, because in a hunter-gatherer society, you're basically working, the work you put into it comes out to be like, I don't know, like 10 hours a week of like hunting for enough food to sustain your tribe. Like, well, and the rest of the time you're like, having fun and telling stories and building things and doing stuff like that. But why did people make this jump to agricultural? Because agricultural society requires that everyone, well, you have to, that's where we got, working for 40 plus hours a week, and everyone has to do it, and work, all like grew out of that. So it's this kind of mystery about how mankind, got into that. And also you find this in other, like I think the Bhagavad Gita, when it talks about the best kind of foods to eat, it talks about fatty and succulent foods. It doesn't just explicitly say vegetables. I mean, I think it would say that if it meant that, and and then I've noticed that even the Bible, every time they talk about eating, it's meat. They talk about having meat. Um, so um, so I think it's something that is like was much more popular in the past, and that we've gone away from in society for some reason.
Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to make people aware of before we head out? Your links will be in the description for one.
Um, yeah. So yeah, the new book, Second Awakening. Go get the new book. It's available at Amazon. And you'll link in the notes. Link in the notes. Come check out my podcast. It's called Daemonosophy, or it's Paul Fredric on YouTube. That'll be in the notes. There's also Daemonosophy on Patreon, where I get a little bit more involved with the people that follow me on there, in exchanging these kinds of ideas. So, yeah, no, I wish
how
the
do you like
best.
how do you like doing Patreon?
It's cool. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's cool. There's some things that they I wish they'd get their act together on. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's not the worst, and it's been a good tool for connecting me with a unique group of people who've been consistent on there. So I'm on there for them, really. Um, so yeah, it works.
Awesome. Yeah, as long as it serves its purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, they keep asking for my ID, and I'm like, I'm not giving you my ID. So that's the only gripe I have with Patreon is that they literally keep asking for me for ID, and I'm like, I shouldn't have to prove who I am. If you
Well, is
don't
it
like
like
what
a
I'm
like a
doing,
like
then
a
just
photo ID?
yeah, yeah, like my driver's license.
Okay. I don't know if they did that to me. Maybe I got on before they started doing that. But anyhow, I understand that. I'm not okay. Oh yeah, here's another thing. Follow me on X. I'm Paul Frederick at Daemonosophy on X, and I'm very active on there. I'm not on Facebook because Facebook is controlled and managed by
I'm
collectivists
suppressed.
and
Mm-hmm.
suppressed, and it's disinformation, and it's just so
Big time.
sad. Are the people I know that are only live on Facebook. Every time I see them, they like don't know what's going on um, in the world mostly. So
Yeah, they're the
um,
most uninformed. Yeah.
yeah, so Facebook is so I'm not on Facebook. I am still on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram. Um, Paul Frederick on Instagram, and also Paul Frederick on TikTok. So I do reels on TikTok as well.
All right, guys, follow him on his Twitter. I have Twitter. I'm actually going to, or X, because Elon Musk doesn't want us to call it Twitter anymore, but I'm going to call
Yeah,
it whatever I want to.
yeah.
So follow him on X. You can follow me. I'm at Mrs. Witchy Perfect, or I think it's just called Black Magic Talk Podcast. My other Twitter, which I've been following very closely, is it's under Kurt Hennig was the best change my mind podcast. So you can just look those up on X, or you can just look up Kurt Hennig podcast. I think it's on there. But whatever you want to do, just follow us on X. If you have any questions, you can DM us. I'm sure they can DM you, Paul. They have any questions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Totally.
So, Paul, I'd like to thank you for coming on. From here on out, we're just going to do shameless plugs for me and Matt.
All right.
So coming up this week on Kurt Hennig was the best change my mind. I'm going to record episode 47. And like I said, we are going to watch along to Kurt's match with Lex Luger. And I have some special things for the Rumble people, so stay tuned to that. You're actually going to see my pretty face on Rumble. On YouTube, you guys will only hear the audio. So if you want to see the video and watch along with me, head on over to Rumble. All links will be in the description field for that, as well as Pro Wrestling Talk is actually going to be on Sunday because Saturday is SummerSlam, and I am going to watch SummerSlam because there are a bunch of stuff I want to watch. I was like going through the archives of WWE right now, and I'm like, oh, I gotta watch this. Oh my gosh, did I just say that? So if you want to see anything, just go ahead and direct message us, and you can direct message me, Matt, with a topic you'd like to do. But I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and blessed be everybody.
Thank you, Mrs. Witchy. Thank you, Matthew, for